Well, good evening and welcome to Yada Yahowah. I'm going to start this evening by talking about the Israeli elections. I think it's probably natural that virtually everyone listening to this program is keen on what is happening in Israel. It's God's country. His people, even though they are absolutely and unequivocally estranged from him. Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition won the election, this time handily, some 64 coalition votes in the Knesset. One of the first comments upon prevailing, even before all the votes were counted, a member of his coalition, a United Towrah Judaism. By the way, Torah does not mean the Torah that we celebrate, as in Yahweh's Torah, but instead their Torah, which is the Talmud. He said, "We won't treat you cruelly like you treated us," M.K. Yatzik Pendrus of the Netanyahu-aligned ultra-Orthodox United Torah Judaism Party told the Ynet News. "We're civilized people, not animals like you. In the government, you stole, you trampled on us. You thought we were just rags. We're human beings." The hypocrisy of Orthodox Jews is amazing. The previous government didn't do anything to them. What they wanted to do was to stop paying religious Jews to be parasites. They wanted to stop paying them to spend all day to do nothing but read their own ridiculous religious material. And that was a very wise thing. As a matter of fact, that's the sadness about the Netanyahu coalition winning re-election, is the Haredi ultra-Orthodox Jewish religious parties will continue to be bribed so that young boys will continue to be indoctrinated, young girls will be subjugated and mistreated, harassed, given no rights. The young men will not be prepared to do anything of value. They will not be given a reasonable education. They will have no access to the internet. They'll give no freedom of choice. And these men, who are animals in the way that they treat and herd their flock, are saying that we're not animals, and yet he immediately calls them animals. Purely hypocrisy. I am very saddened, though, by the results of the election because, while I did not like Lapid, I think Lapid was disastrous. He is an admitted progressive, which I think is the worst of all politicians. He went to the United Nations and advocated a two-state solution, which will, when active, will be the final solution for Jews. The world will collapse upon them the moment that is imposed upon them. And to be a Jew and advocating for it is an inexcusable offense. But in this particular coalition, in addition to bribing the Haredi parties to support him and the disaster that is for Israel, both financially, economically, and also in terms of the freedoms of the people, the coalition has an ultra-Orthodox religious party, an ultra-Orthodox religious party that united with it that are thugs. Their chants are death to Arabs. They will clean it up for election nights and say death to terrorists, but they are purposefully provocative. And they are largely responsible for the settler abuse that's taking place in Israel. And at one time, I besmirched the Biden administration and the U.S. press for making a big deal of it, and I think they did over-exaggerate it. But as we came up to this election, the gangs of roving Orthodox Jews tormenting Arabs was absurd, sad, exceedingly disappointing. And the fact is that by having a coalition comprised of these kinds of people, the world is going to have lots of justification for turning on Israel and no longer taking Israel seriously and continuing to advocate against Israel. So it will be exceedingly counterproductive. And of course, Netanyahu himself is a lying, self-serving scumbag. So
yeah.
they were really in a position like when like this last election, where you had the worst of the worst. So I'm sorry for Israel. But Israel continuing to turn away from God is really what is predicted, so that we enter the time of troubles. It is interesting. One of the things that Netanyahu did to win the election was he claimed that he would never have put together the Frankensteinian coalition that included Abbas and the Arab parties. And it did cost Israel dearly, I think about $6 billion to bribe them to be part of the coalition, so I can't stand parliamentary politics. But Netanyahu, who denied that he did it and said he would never do it, not only did it, but told Abbas, I'm the only one who can lead this integration of Ram into Israeli coalition politics. And in that, he's right. It's why I've said for years that if you're political and you favor the Republicans, for example, in the United States over Democrats, then you're being played for a fool. Because actually, the government spends more money under Republican administrations because no one is as watchful, and they can do what the Democrats can't do. You know, under Reagan, under Bush, under Trump, we had horrible inflation and deficit spending. But clearly, Netanyahu was a liar when he said that this is something that separates him. But it's also important to realize that the reason that Israel went so far right, and by right I actually mean religious in this case, is because that cobbled together government that Bennett and Lapid put together was disastrous for Israel, and the people recognized it. There's been two numbskulls that I haven't spoken much of, Kyrie Irvin and Kanye West, both blacks, both who have spoken out against Jews, both of which are getting timeouts. Kanye West's timeout may be permanent, although there's lots of people waving banners saying Kanye is right. Both are actually motivated by one of the most villainous movements in the world today, and it is international. Its roots are here in the United States during the late 19th century, and it is called Black Hebrew Roots or Black Israeli movement. And so it is the Black Israelites is what they call themselves now. They used to call themselves Black Jews, but they've gone to Black Israelites. Their claim is that they are the real Jews and of the promise, and that the actual Jews are really just imposters. Their claim is based, when they're asked to demonstrate how that's possible, they will turn to the Falashas, which are a tribe in Ethiopia that have claimed falsely to have the Ark of the Covenant and to be Jewish. They're Jewish in religion. They're not Jewish ethnically. I think I had long ago thought that they had taken a substantial number of DNA tests and showed that they had some J1. They do not. There is no evidence whatsoever that the Falashas, in fact, all evidence is the contrary. They have no Jewish ethnicity. There's only one tribe of Africans that have any meaningful Jewish ethnicity. It's exceedingly small, and it's where a bunch of Jews for a short period of time during one of the diasporas lived, and to escape the travesties being imposed upon them. And that's it. Then they'll claim that, they intermarried or had babies with the Egyptians, and the Egyptians were black. I'm sorry, but not only were the Egyptians not black, they're Caucasians. But even the stories that they want to claim that Cleopatra was a black queen, no, she was Greek.
Yes, she was.
We really have
Ptolemy family.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was Greek. We have the world upside down. they will claim that some of the diaspora Jews then filled in the African continent and then were sold as slaves here. And then they will claim that the fake Jews were the ones that owned the ships that took them here and blame Jews for it. They even claim that because the Torah speaks of 400 years of captivity in Egypt, that it's really speaking of them because they were slaves for 400 years in America. They were not slaves for 400 years in America, not even close. And I can assure you that Yahowah did not intervene in America to liberate them. There were no signs and wonders. And so they are not those people. And those people were taken to Israel, not to America. I'm not speaking here to try to dissuade someone who is stupid enough to be fooled by the black Israelites. If you're that stupid, no amount of evidence or reason is going to resonate with you. You're just a buffoon. Stop breathing. Do the world a service. I'm saying this because there are people who are listening and will listen in the future who may wonder what it is about these people that is so asinine. They are growing ever more belligerent. There are more and more of them that have bought into conspiracy theories. They will cite the protocols of the elders of Zion like it's a real book, unaware that it was a complete hoax. They will quote the conspiracy theory that Jews control the world, which, by the way, if they did, then it's just like the theory of Jews killing Jesus. If Jews can kill God and at 0.2% of the world's population, they can run the world, then we ought to be bowing down to them. Neither are true. And by the way, this notion of claiming to be the Israelites is something you may want to rethink, because if you read the prophets, God is really upset with them. God has divorced himself from them. God has disowned them. God has exposed and condemned them in every possible way, and says that they are appalling and repulsive. So if you want that legacy, if you claim that for yourself, as Christians do in replacement theology, wear that badge. Because in the end, while he will reconcile his relationship with the few, it will be precious few, and all of those who have been religious will be annihilated. So if that's what you claim to be, good luck with that. Kanye West's quotations were all part of black Israelites. That's why I said if you know where I came from, you know I can't be anti-Semitic. Yes, pal, you are an anti-Semite, and where you come from is stupidity. He also has a sign on his social media page that is the Omni. It's the we believe in all religions and all gods, even religions that don't have gods. And then he has the Hela as his sign off, and Hela is the name of the goddess of the underworld. And Hela, because it's supposed to be hot, and hell means that that's really hot. That's really I'm wonderful because I'm hot. Associating with hell. That's how stupid these people are. And yet, there's enough people out there that buy their music, that care about them. To be attracted to a numbskull makes you a numbskull. Kyrie Irvin is the most recent. He posted a video on his Facebook site thinking he was just doing a swell thing after talking about the fact that he was the representative of the real Jews in previous Facebook sites. And the book, the video was of a book that was written by an advocate, one of the leaders in the Black Israelite movement, who, in his book, says all of the manner of stupid things that I've already shared, that the Jews that we know are the descendants of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob are not Jews at all, but instead African slaves were the real Jews, although they were mostly taken from West Africa, mostly enslaved by Muslims, and brought here on boats mostly owned by Europeans. But nonetheless, that is their claim. It's sort of like the claim that the Mormons have, that they're the Jews fled Israel on a really, really big boat, and crossed the Atlantic, and that the native people in the Americas were really Jews. Of course, they've done the DNA testing and found that the Native Americans all came from Mongolia, eastern Russia, and northern China, but don't let science stand in the way of a good story. That is the nature of these people, and the thing that is the most concerning is that, for example, when Kyrie Irving, who's a basketball player for the Brooklyn Nets, when he posted his apology, which he, by the way, never did really apologize, he said, "I was studying YHWH. And in my study of YHWH, I came upon this. I didn't know it was bad." Many of these black Israelite movements actually steal, forlorn, my transliterations and translations. And they use them in this perverted mix of black racial hatred, black supremacy, and a little rabbinic Judaism and some Christianity thrown in to create quite an illusion that is very profitable for the thugs that run it. And so it is a serious problem, and it is violent, and it is seriously anti-Semitic. So we should be quite concerned by what they have done. Kevin Durant, who's the other part of that new Brooklyn Nets team, came out, and he had a beautiful quote today. I'll read it to you because words only do it justice. "I ain't here to judge nobody, nor talk down to nobody for how they feel, their view, or anything. I just didn't like anything that went on. I feel like it was all unnecessary. I felt like we could have just kept playing basketball and kept quiet as an organization. I just don't like none of it." So clearly, money does not buy intelligence. Yeah. People looking for stars to admire are not turning to their vocabulary or their grammar. But let me tell you something there, Mr. Durant. When you promote an anti-Semitic lie that is as vicious as the one that Kyrie Irving posted, there will be consequences. And we do care. These are the kind of lies that led up to the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
These are the kind of lies that justified the 3 Roman invasions of Judea. These are the kind of lies that have caused the progressives to think that Israel doesn't belong to the Jews, and instead it belongs to the Muslims.
Pakistanians.
Yeah, the Pakistanians. When people promote this kind of stuff, and you're in the public eye, associated with an organization that is paying you millions upon millions of dollars, it matters. Kanye West found out that even a German company that participated in the Nazi regime, both of whose founders were Nazi Party members, even they, when they're making billions off of you with a B, will drop you. So, think, people. Don't be stupid. But the world is very, very quickly turning into an anti-Semitic mess with the promotion of disgusting conspiracy theories, and it's amazing how many people are willing to follow them. There's an article out this week about the Presbyterian Church. I was, back in my youth, I was a member of the Presbyterian Church. It was the youngest elder, in the history of the church. A tremendous embarrassment to me now, of course, looking back, but yet a huge advantage. It's like, not nearly to this extent, but it's like Moshe growing up in Pharaoh's household and understanding the beast
how it
that
works.
was Pharaoh,
Mhm.
and the integration of religion and politics into the caste system and in slavery and the military in that country, and why he stood up for his people, who didn't, by the way, take that very well. They turned on him. But why he did the right thing and stood up for his people, because he understood the beast. And so, having grown up in the upper echelons of the Presbyterian Church, I learned a lot about the beast that is mainstream Protestant Christianity. And it helps me now when I'm translating Yahweh's testimony and commenting on it, because I know when God is specifically besmirching Christianity. The church is losing members well, I would say a sieve, but a sieve, does restrict the flow of water, and they are not doing so. The numbers are staggering. I'm looking at them now, and by the way, it's all because of their progressive agenda. The Presbyterian Church is more interested in supporting LGBTQ
whatever.
plus, whatever it is, than they are even their own religion. And as such, they've gotten to a point where, well, I think they've lost 700,000 members in the last decade on what was a membership of about 1.7 million people. So over the last decade, they've lost about 40% of their membership. Isn't that amazing? Oh, in fact, currently they boast 1.1 million active members, which is down 700,000 members since 2012. And this was a 2021 report. So in 9 years, they had lost some 40% of their membership. So go ahead, continue down the path that you're on, because obviously that's working out really well for you. There's a couple of items in the news that are really, really disturbing. There's it came to my attention because Leah shared this story with me. A gentleman just passed away. Well, let's call him what he is. He is an animal. His name was Samuel Little. He was a black man, born June 7, 1940. By 1975, he began raping, torturing, and killing women. He raped, tortured, and killed 93 women. He is the most proficient serial killer in American history, maybe in the world. Of course, nobody speaks of him because, well, Black Lives Matter. He only killed, well, I shouldn't say he only killed black. About 80% of his victims were, by the way, black, and he is a black man. But the reason I bring this story to your attention is that by 1975, he had been arrested 26 times in 11 states for crimes such as theft, assault, attempted rape, fraud, and physical attacks on government officials. 26 times. He was arrested and charged with the murder of a 22-year-old woman who had gone missing, but the grand jury declined to indict him. He was charged with the murder of another woman, a 26-year-old, whose body was found, and yet, because the jury decided to mistrust witness testimonies, he was acquitted of the crime that he actually committed. So here's a man that if he had just been locked up after, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 25th time that he had committed a serious crime, that no one would have died. But 93 women were raped, tortured, and killed because of progressive politics where we don't want to incarcerate the perpetrator, which is, of course, is what's causing places like Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, San Francisco, California, Los Angeles, California, to be unlivable. There's another one, the story is very similar, out of California. A young lady, a sorority girl, UCLA, was working in a furniture store doing the evening shift alone, and a black man walked into the store. He had a really nasty vibe, according to the woman. She texted her manager and says, I'm afraid. This man's walked in. He is really giving me the creeps on the way that he is staring at me. I need help. 2 minutes later, she had been stabbed 26 times.
Oh, God.
The man who stabbed her was out on parole. He was had already committed some 10 offenses where he had served jail time and had been convicted. And yet they let him back out. And he was out even after having assaulted a police officer. But because of some liberal agenda, we let him out, and he killed this poor woman. I feel like it's important just to counteract stupidity, but climate change is the headline. Kilimanjaro's and Africa's last glaciers to go by 2050. I'm here to tell you that they will be gone by 2033. But nonetheless, they say they'll be gone by 2050, and they're blaming climate change. It's astonishing that we have such groupthink now in the world, and that science has been so co-opted by politics. The evidence is overwhelming that the Earth has gone through cooling and warming periods for the past several 100 million years, and that every 300 to 600 years we go through one of these cycles. The average cycle is about 600 years long. And even in recorded history, which goes back now about 5,000 years, we can track them. And we know when we were at a cooling period, when we were in a warming period. And, of course, there was even bigger swings during the last ice age, which was 10,000 years ago. The Earth goes through these cycles. It has to do with our orbit, our rotation on our axis, and also the sun has various phases. And collectively, they cause these warming and cooling periods. And the interesting thing is that mankind, and animals as well, do much better during the warming periods than they do during the cold periods. That things like the Black Death and Black Plague occurred during a cold period. We came out of the last cold period, 1850, and began this warming period. Of course, now it's blamed on the industrial age, when, that the Earth has endured this and will continue to endure it. The glaciers have come and go. There's another story that I picked up this week about the Greeks. Having translated Daniel, you have to get into Greek history. And there is this myth in America that the Greeks were the birthplace of democracy, and that they were enlightened, philosophical people who treated others well and used their words wisely, and it's just not true. The Greeks were savages. And in a Greek culture, women had literally no rights. She was property. She was very seldom able to leave the home. If she left the home, she could not speak to anyone. She would have to be veiled. No rights to own anything. Husband could beat her, cheat on her, whatever he wanted to do. She had no say in the matter. And they were vicious. So this idea that this is a lovely bastion of humanity, well, all you really have to do is read Greek history from Alexander the Great. Learn how he came to power. Learn what he did to places like Tyre, Gaza, how he treated his defeated foes, what he said of himself in places like Egypt, and the debauchery at the final years of his life where he was parading around as a god, and then the conniving disaster that followed and the generations of the successors that followed him and the way they treated the world that they carved up between them and then fought among themselves. We're dealing with an exceedingly despicable community.
Yeah.
One last item in the news, and that is that in the Ukrainian war, we are hearing that the Russians are actually having discussions about the deployment of nuclear weapons, and that the Americans are having similar discussions, and that we now have an official statement from the U.S. government saying that the Russians use nuclear weapons in the Ukraine, that America will instantly wipe out the entire Russian military. Well, we went through this period of threats. If you invade the Ukraine, we'll put on the mother of all sanctions. What did it do? The Russian economy and the ruble has never been stronger, and the American dollar and our economy has seldom been weaker. It didn't work very well. And, of course, the people who paid the heaviest price are the undeserving, the Ukrainians, whom we continue to send billions and billions of dollars of weapons. And so now that the Russians are saying, because you've sent us all of the Ukrainians all these weapons, and we can't use the kinds of warfare tactics that would spare people's lives, as if the United States ever cared about that, when we use cluster bombs and all manner of shock and awe when we attacked Iran for absolutely no good reason, and then invaded Afghanistan. We didn't care about how many civilians we killed. We would gun them down and with our Apache helicopters, giggle at it, and then lie about what happened. But nonetheless, we want to blame the Russians. And now that they say, you've given us no choice but to respond this way, if you continue, particularly if you continue to give them weapons like this, what do you think that Russia is going to do? I mean, you don't have to be all this smart to figure this out. We threatened them. We threatened to turn the Ukraine into a war zone, to arm it with all manner of missiles and defense systems for the West, so that the Soviets were neutered and surrounded. And so they invaded to keep that from happening. Now that we have supplied the Ukraine with all manner of weapons, and if the Russians were to use tactical nuclear weapons, what do you think they'll do if we were then to declare war on them and take out their navy and their army?
Well,
I mean, with 100% likelihood,
we can't stop.
Right, with 100% likelihood, not 99.9, with 100% likelihood, if we did that, there would be countless nuclear missiles headed to the United States. Guaranteed. And I said, well, I want to do it because it'd be sure annihilation for them. Sure annihilation for them the moment you take out their military. That's 100% likely. And we will say that as if we think we're smart, as we think we're moral, as we think that we're hold the high ground. We do not. All right, we're going to return to Hosea, which is where we have been these last couple of months. We're actually sticked on the first chapter of Hosea. We ended the program last week on Hosea 1:6. Hosea means he saves. It reads, Hosea was asked to marry a temple prostitute. And the reason Hosea was asked by Yahweh to marry a temple prostitute is he wanted his prophet to be able to passionately convey why Yahweh had to divorce his people, why he had to estrange himself from them, why he was disgusted by them, why it was not possible to continue to have a relationship with them, and why they would have a very, very long time out. And so the best way to do that is you want to know what it's like to be in a relationship with an unfaithful whore? Go marry a temple prostitute. See how that works out for you. So Hosea did as he was asked. And so Yahweh said, after she conceived again, and he gave birth to a daughter. So he said to him, call her name Lo Ruchamah, no mercy, no favors, no compassion, for being unlovable. Lo Ruchamah. No affection, no forgiveness, and no benefits. Because it will be a long time owed, well beyond the point which would have been expected, before I once again perceive as lovable, show mercy towards, or beneficially favor the house of Yisrael, such that I will lift them up, honor, or forgive them. Ki nasa nasa lahem. So, do you think God told the truth?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what did he say? It will be a long time before I once again perceive them to be lovable, show mercy to them, or beneficially favor the house of Yisrael, such that I lift them up, honor, and forgive them. This was 7-something BCE. Was a really long time, wasn't it? In fact, that time is still ongoing because guess what? Israel just isn't willing to listen. 2,700 years later, and they're still religious. They're still repulsive. They're still unlovable. I mean, that's a long time to be obstinate. So he says, it's going to be a long time. Ode can mean almost an eternal time.
Yeah.
So, if you're part of this stupid black Israelite movement, think it through. You don't want to be identified with that. And it's only once Israelites reject their religion, become unreligious and unpolitical, and choose to honor the covenant that is explained in the Torah, that they will be accepted again. And by the way, you can't be in the covenant if you're religious. So you're screwed, blued, and tattooed if you're in the black Israelite movement. Yah was announcing to the northern kingdom, Israel, apart from Yehudah, thus 10 of the 12 tribes, that they are no longer lovable. As a matter of fact, they wouldn't even exist as a political entity in a very, very short order. They will receive neither compassion nor mercy. Furthermore, they would remain unapproachable for a very long time, much longer than they would have expected. Unapproachable means, and I was very clear with this, we read it clearly in Daniel, that there'd be no more prophets. It'd be the end of prophecy. That's a real problem for the rabbis and their Talmud, because they claim to be prophets. Nope. God said, nope, there'd be no more. Not then, not a little bit later, not ever. Never again. That's a little problem for Christian New Testament too, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Of course, it's no problem for Islam, because if you're going to believe that Muhammad was a prophet when he never issued a single prophecy he got right, then nothing's a problem for you. For the next 140 generations, there would be no favors, no forgiveness from God towards Israel. And of course, during that period of time, they would be bludgeoned by the Assyrians. They would be bludgeoned by the Babylonians. Twice they were seized by the Babylonians. They'd be bludgeoned by the Greeks, as the Greeks didn't give two hoots about them. They only cared that that they were between that which they cared about in Syria and Egypt. And so several of them did harass Jews. Then there were the 3 Roman invasions. Even our edit team, when I wrote about, let's never forget about what happened in 66 BCE, because it was the first of these Roman invasions, and not just look at what happened in 69 CE. And I say, wait a minute, what happened in those 3 years? No, BCE versus CE, and the first Roman invasion of Judea was by Pompey, and he came because the Jews were acting badly. In fact, Jews had become Greek; they all bore Greek names, and they were fighting among themselves for who would be king and who would be brothers, fighting among themselves. Brothers of Alexandria was their mother's name, and these 2 Greeks were fighting among themselves for who would be high priest and who would be king. Now, you would think they would want to be king, and that high priest would be the booby prize, but no. The big money was being high priest. It's like the big money today in Israel is not being a politician, it's being a rabbi. So there'd be 3 Roman invasions. Then after the Romans would come the Roman Catholic Church, and after the Roman Catholic Church would come the Muslims, and after the Muslims would come the Nazis. And somewhere along the line, they said, maybe we ought to be going at this differently, because this clearly is not working for us. 140 generations, no forgiveness from God. The Israelites would not only be on their own, they were put out of business. God ceased speaking through them. Just translated a passage in Ezekiel 4. And boy, I tell you what, I'm going to be in Ezekiel for a while. I guess Ezekiel 5, because I'm only in chapter 5, and it's a long book. But oh my God, I can't wait to get out of Babylon. If I had to do one more book written in Babylon, I would opt for my retirement watch and say, okay, I've done it.
We're done.
I cannot do this anymore. God, I understand that Yahweh had a message that needed to be delivered, and he picked, I guess, the best 2 options he had available to him. But, oh, ouch. These are not guys I ever want to meet. I'll tell you that for certain. Anyway, God stopped working with him. So as I'm reading here, God says, listen, there's something, because of your repulsiveness, because of your religiosity, and the fact that you're not going to give up on it, because you're stubborn and recalcitrant, you're as pig-headed as a mule. I'm going to do something I have never done before, and I will never do again. Okay, so this would have been on the eve of the final assault on Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. And so God says, so I'm going to do something with a witness among the Gentiles because of your religiosity and your stubbornness that I have never done before and I will never do again. Okay, so it is God specifically engaging to do something he has never done before and he will never do again, and it's happening specifically because of the religiosity and the stubbornness of his people, and it is with the Gentiles as a witness. So I went through it. I said, well, God's promised, or at that point, from that point to today, or to this time anyway, there'd be 3 engagements of Yahweh. 3. One was when he came to fulfill the first 4 mikveh. Now, he didn't fulfill the first 4 mikveh because of the stubborn, pig-headed religiosity of the Jews. And he didn't fulfill the mikveh with the Goyim as the primary witness. And he couldn't say that I would never do again because he's going to come back here in 11 years and fulfill the last 2 mikveh. So it can't be that. And, of course, here in 11 years, in 6,000 Yah, 2033, he's going to fulfill the last two Mikra, but it isn't because of Jewish religiousness that he is doing it, and it isn't as a witness to the Goyim, instead for those who give up their religiosity to choose Yahweh instead. And it is something he's clearly done before. So it can't be that. So there's only one thing I can think of that God promised to do through his prophets and in his Torah, with Goyim as the primary witnesses, that was being done because he couldn't work with his people because they were too religious. And that he would do that he has never done before and that he would never do again. And that is call on Goyim to witness to his people, to call them home.
Mm-hmm, of course.
We are the living embodiment of that prophecy. Now, we're not taking any credit in this case because God clearly says, I do it once, I'll never do it again. So,
you want to be
really careful.
And the perfect, yes, I'm sure.
Yeah, you want to be really careful about taking credit. Now, there is a bit of good news, though, that I did want to share, because we are really operating now as a family and have been for a goodly number of years. We have what is now a beautiful website that I'd be very proud for Yehudim and for Yahowah to point to, that is wonderfully interactive and provides all 25 some odd volumes freely, and so they can be read on a PC, on a monitor, on a tablet, or on a smartphone. Really well done, and with wonderful search features and links. This particular program, where now the interface of it is tied in with everything else, and the same theme, and where the shows are being logged in and explained for those who want to listen. We have a marvelous social media outreach that is being coordinated and managed with promotions on things like Twitter and really rich coordinated content throughout the social media platforms like Facebook. We also, if you go to Amazon.com and either search under my name, Craig Wynn, or under Yada Yahowah series, you'll see that some 25 volumes of Yada Yahowah are available at the cost to ship and print, royalty free. The Kindle versions are dimes. The paperbacks are in the low teens, which is basically the shipping and printing cost. Basically, that's all it is. And the hardbacks are also available in the high teens. And they're all beautiful. They're all professionally published, beautifully laid out. And so and all of them have been retranslated and rewritten within the last 2 to 3 years. So they're all current. That's a lot of people working together to share Yahweh's testimony and to call his people home. And everybody is working for free. None of us receive donations. None of us accept donations. None of us do anything other than a free will offering out of love for Yahweh and his people to share the truth. So we are, plural, Goyim, who are serving as the witnesses, in this case, to call Yahweh's people home, to call them out of Babylon, to quote the prophet Jeremiah, and back home to Yahweh and Yisrael. So that is what he was talking about, and it is a direct implication of Hosea 1:6, where God says, I'm sorry, but it's going to be a long, long time before I'm able to work with you again. Now, since Yahweh had promised to bless his people and to bless people from every race and place by way of the covenant he established with Abraham, he would continue to love Yehudah for the sake of his beloved, Dod, and for the remnant of his people. And yet, with the house and family of Yehudah, it means beloved of Yah or related to Yah, I will continue to love them, favoring them, and providing forgiveness and mercy through them. Ruchamah him. I will liberate, deliver, and save them as Yahweh, their God. So to be saved as a Jew, Yahud, Yahudim plural, Yahud, Jew, you have to recognize that Yahweh is your Savior, and you have to acknowledge his name. There was no G-D here. There was no Adonai, Lord. There was no Hashem. I will liberate, deliver, and save them as Yahweh, their God. You know, Yahweh is a tripping stone for a lot of people. They have believed the hogwash of the rabbis that no one knows how to pronounce his name, or believe the hogwash that his name is too respected to state it. Those are both lies. The 22 letters that comprise the Hebrew language, 17 are consonants, 5 are vowels, the yod, the hey, and the y. And the hey, the yod, the y, and the hey are all vowels. They're open mouth sounds is what that means. The y is pronounced very much like it is in English. The y is a vowel consonant in English. The W is a vowel consonant in English, just as it is in Hebrew. It makes the same sound in English as it does in Hebrew, as does the Y. It's all a legacy of Hebrew, which was the first written phonetic alphabet. The Hey is exceedingly easy to pronounce. It was in the verb that Yahweh introduced to us, where he said, I am who I am. I am is Haya. Haya has 2 Heys in it, begins with a Hey, ends with a Hey. It's Haya. Towrah is a perfect example. No one doubts how that it's properly pronounced Towrah. The O sound in Towrah is from a Wah. The Ah sound at the end of Towrah is from the Hey. So it is Yahweh. That takes 15 minutes to figure it out. However, I did not liberate, deliver, or save them by bow, shooting projectiles, or being harsh, by a sword or any kind of weapon, by fighting a war, by horsemen and swiftly flying aircraft, by mobile military vehicles. Well, then he would never be elected to the Congress or Senate of the United States for damn sure, because America wants to save the world by fighting wars. And we're really good at it. We call ourselves the world's peacemaker, and we have the biggest military in the world, larger than all the rest of the world combined. It's one of the great lies. Yeah, I said, no, that's not how I saved my people. I saved my people and delivered them with myself being their savior when I fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, Pakudim, and Shabuah. And the remnant of Jews that I will save in the end, I will give them a second chance through the Purim, which is the day of reconciliations. So Yahweh was promising to forgive. Now, this is really interesting. When I was reading about the Black Hebrew movement, the Black Israelite movement, there's actually 2 movements: one Black Hebrew roots and Black Hebrew roots, I guess, and the Black Israelites. Both anti-Semitic conspiracies and cults. But as I was reading, the 2 authors of books published to debunk them were both Christians. And they were both claiming that by trying to observe the Torah, they were precluding themselves of salvation. Because as Paul said, you have to be perfect to be saved by the Torah. And that the Torah will just condemn you. You have to accept Jesus Christ. Well, there is the wrong condemning the wrong, where I guess two wrongs makes a wrong. So here is Yahweh saying that He is going to save Israel, and He did so, and the house of Yehudah through Dod and Howsha, placing his nefesh soul within Yosha. They were the people that would play the starring roles, and the Torah clearly does not condemn. You don't have to be perfect for the Torah to help you. In fact, the Torah would be of no value to if you were perfect. The Torah's value is if you're imperfect. Dod is a wonderful example of an imperfect man being perfected in God's eyes by observing the Torah. Moshe is a less flawed individual, but clearly a man who is perfected by the Torah. Moshe is a marvelous example, too, of a man who at times did things that he wasn't supposed to do, and yet Yahweh embraced him and took him to heaven after giving him a bird's eye view of the promised land. Yahweh has a plan, and that plan is that He paid the price to serve as the Pesach El, the Passover lamb, to give His people life. He allowed His soul to go in our stead to Sheol, to the place of separation, to perfect us, to cleanse us of religion and politics, so that we could be part of His family, which we are adopted on Bokurim. He then enriches and empowers His children, enlightening and emancipating them on Shabuah, so that we're prepared to function appropriately on Towrah and call His people out of Babylon and to home through the Torah, so that they will embrace Yahweh on reconciliations and come to camp out with God in a conditions very similar to Eden. So, Dod is presented as the Son of God. He is referred to as God, as he will certainly qualify as the means to Israel's salvation. Read his Psalms. Come to embrace him as the Son of God and the Messiah, and Yahweh as his Father. Follow his example of observing the Torah and being part of the covenant, and you will to enjoy an eternity with him. So this is yet another renunciation of Judaism, as well as its derivatives, Christianity and Islam, because the God whose name they do not recognize is the source of our salvation. It is something we have been emphasizing since the beginning. When it comes to knowing God and developing a relationship with him, acknowledging his name is an essential first step. Now, be careful. One of the things that I despise most about these cults calling themselves either Black Israelites or Hebrew Roots movement is they will purloin from these writings the transliteration of Yahweh's name, and they will jump up and down and sing it in song when they clearly do not know him. And there may be only one thing worse than negating the value of Yahweh's name, as we see in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and that is misusing his name, as we witness it in those cults. So be very, very careful when you hear Yahweh's name, that it is set into the context of his testimony. The phrase Yasha ba Yahweh, salvation by Yahweh, serves to explain Yahusha's name, his nature and his purpose. One of the reasons that we never read Yosha's name, and there isn't a single prophecy about Yosha, that's the actual name of the person that Christians have misnamed Jesus. He's not named in a single prophecy, not obviously as Jesus, not even as Yosha. Not once is he brought up by name. And the reason for that is that the role he plays is important. You know, Yeshaya, Isaiah 53 speaks of him as the Passover lamb. Dod wrote 2 Mizmor Psalms speaking of the sacrifice that he would make as the Passover lamb, 22 and 88. That role is essential, and God speaks of it. He told Abraham on Mount Moriah that he would provide the lamb. However, there is no reason whatsoever to know the name of the individual who would serve as the Passover lamb and carry Yahweh's nefesh soul as a probe so that Yahweh could experience everything that was happening, the pain of that sacrifice. Because it is Yahweh saving us, as he states here. So since it is Yahweh saving us, to create a religion, even if you knew his name, Hosea, would be stupid. And to create a religion of Jesus and call him the Christ is dumber than dumb. Yahweh is the Savior. It is Yahweh saving us in the fulfillment of Pesach and Matzah, leading to Bikurim. It's one of the great problems of Judaism. Judaism, Rabbinic Judaism as it exists today, was coterminous with the rise of Christianity. And the Jews in power at the time didn't like the threat of Jews recognizing that Hosea was the Passover lamb and celebrating Yahweh's fulfillment of these first mikvahs. So they went after them with a vengeance. And then when the Christians came up with this idea that this Jesus was somehow the Son of God and the Messiah, rather than just simply announcing that's not true, the Messiah and Son of God is to David, he is the returning king, they created this religion to besmirch the reputation of Hosea. And in so doing, they besmirched Yahweh's reputation.
Mm-hmm.
They denied Yahweh's promise. They denied their people the knowledge of the fulfillment of Pesach, Passover. But that's what they did, and that is the birth of Rabbinic Judaism. If you don't think so, just study the life of Akiba and learn about Akiba's false messiah, Bar Kokhba, and how he was put in position so as to deny the Christian mythos of a Jesus Christ. Look how well that worked out for the Jews, too. Led directly to the diaspora. So, it is Yahweh's soul fulfilling the mikra of Pesach and Matzah. His name, therefore, is the only name which actually matters. As such, Judaism and Christianity are misnomers. Since it is by fulfilling the mikra invitations to be called out and meet with God that we become immortal, perfected, adopted, enriched, and empowered during the first 4 Moed Mikra, all of which were fulfilled in year 4000 Yah, 33 CE, Yahweh is not liberating us from the deadly nature of religion through the deployment of armaments or fighting battles, but instead by fulfilling the first 4 Mikra. And while there will be copious amounts of weapons deployed and horrible wars as we mitigate and migrate through the last days, no one will be saved by such malfeasance. We don't save people by attacking them with weapons. We humans will be killing one another at an even more prodigious rate, but that is hardly the path to heaven. God would go on to say, when she is weaned, lo, Ruchamah, no mercy, no favors, no compassion, as a result of being unlovable, she conceived and bore a son. And he said, announce that his name is Lo Am Ani. Lo is not. Am is family, people, and Ani is not my people. You want to be really careful of those of you who are touting this black Yisraelites. Not my family. Even if you were right, you're wrong. Not my family, because you are not part of my family, and I am not your God. They had chosen other gods. Gods they had made, gods they had inherited. Are you listening, Israel? You have become so annoying with your perverted religion that Yahweh has disowned you. I'm not being anti-Semitic here. I'm telling you what God said. This book was written to you in your language by one of your prophets. One of the most important prophetic recitals in all of history. And this is what it says. God is saying that worst of all, you worship a God who is not Yahweh, leaving you with no God at all. Judaism isn't a monotheistic religion. It is a religion without a God. Introduced to the one true God, you have joined the ranks of those who irritate and annoy God. Israel, apart from Yehudah, was entering history's longest intermission. And while God would no longer endure them, he would assure that they would endure long enough to eventually be saved. This is Hosea 1:10. Yet the number of your children, of the children of Israel, shall be as the sand of the sea, because it cannot be counted, numbered, or recorded. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said of them, you are not my family, it shall be said to them, you are the children of the living God. Then the descendants of Yehudah and the children of Israel will be gathered together and be as one. They will appoint for themselves the best one as their leader. And then they will ascend upward to a higher place out of the land, because great, intensely important, and empowering shall be Yom Yisrael, the day God's seeds are sown in Jezreel. Well, there's a turnaround, isn't it?
Well, I guess.
The most horrible place where Jews and Israelites worshipped Baal and Asherah, where they engaged in the most murderous of behavior, where the worst of the Jewish leaders rose to power and died. That place is going to be celebrated again. And there will be enough Jews such that there will be a remnant that gets to hear these words. You are the children of the living God. Boy, that's not being pronounced anywhere, is it? We are still, even though 11 years away, we are still, it seems like, millennia away from the descendants of Yehudah and the children of Israel being gathered together. I mean, the Sephardim Jews and the Ashkenazis are having a tough time. This idea that being a Israelite and being a Yahud, and that the two merging is something that God has promised. It's what the 31st chapter of Yirmiyah is all about. That it speaks of the of reconciliation between Israel and Yehudah, and then of them being reconciled unto Yahweh, and that both having the Torah written inside along with Yahweh's name. They will be gathered together as one, and they will appoint for themselves the best one as their leader. Who is the best of Israel? There's only two candidates.
Dode.
Yeah, there's only two candidates, Moshe and Dode.
Yeah.
But it's going to be Dode.
He's the king.
Listen, it would not be fair to Moshe. He's paid his dues. He is retired. Dode actually loved this job. He loved defending Israel. He loved leading Israel. He loved singing to Israel. He loved teaching Israel. He loved being a shepherd. Dode's perfectly suited for this job. He's the best of Israel. He will be the leader. And he won't be the leader for, a a Knesset term of 4 years or 5 years or whatever the Knesset. He's going to be the leader forever. Yeah, if you
Won't have
don't
to bribe
like
anybody.
if you don't like Dode, you won't have to bribe anybody. If you don't like Dode, you don't want to end up with God in heaven, because Dode will be king forever.
Big man on campus,
yeah.
huh?
Yeah, he is this thing that God is doing. Certainly, that one he wasn't speaking of Dode, because he's done it before and he'll do it again. Yeah, Dode is the guy. And you read Dode's Psalms and you look at his character. You look at the way that he loved Yah and Yah loved him. It's pretty easy to see why. And then it says they will ascend to a higher place out of the land. Oh, what's a higher place out of the land? Shamayim.
Heaven. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is a celebration of the day that God's seeds are sown in Jezreel. Now, it was a rapid downward progression. Israel had fallen from being unlovable and undeserving to being disinherited. They were no longer covenant. Having rejected Yahweh, God rejected them. In the matter of quantity over quality, they were long on one and deprived of the other. Clearly, God was not running a popularity contest. While their downgraded status would plague them for centuries, even for millennia, the relationship was slated for resolution. And we're just 11 years away from it now in 2022. Kippurim in year 6000 Yah, October 2nd at sunset in Jerusalem in 2033. For them was a distant light on the horizon. It's much closer for us today. Some of the descendants of those who had been ostracized for having become obnoxious would be restored to fellowship, becoming the children of the living God. The rift that had torn them apart will be mended. Not only will Yisrael and Yehudah come together again, they will be one in the covenant family with Yahweh. Having been dispersed throughout the nations, they will be collected and gathered in one accord, something that seems unfathomable considering the propensity of Jews to disagree with each other and their God. But it's going to occur. You have 40% of the world's Jewish population in the United States of America.
Mm-hmm. But
he's talking about all of those who are part of the covenant coming to Israel. And of course, with the Haredi now re-empowered, the only people who can make can apply for
immigrate,
Israel's citizenship, immigration, are Orthodox Jews, and they are not going to be part of Yahweh's covenant family. So this is something that is still future, and we don't have a lot of days of future left. One of the many areas at this time of agreement will be on their leader, their shepherd and Messiah. They will choose the best one, Yahweh's beloved Dode. There is only one way, as I've said, to ascend upward out of the land, and that is to be given access to Shamayim, heaven. Of course, Muslims will think that you can ride a winged ass, a wild barak, leave a hoofy print on the Temple Mount, and ride up to the seven heavens, all of which you're going to be meeting with Jews. So that part you've got to deal with, but that's what the Quran and Hadith say. And of course, on the way to the Islamic heaven, you must pass through the Islamic hell. So the first stop to heaven is hell, but fear not unless you're a woman, because the Islamic hell is filled with women who are being hung by their breasts with meat hooks through them because they were not grateful to their husbands. It is a lovely place. And of course, when you finally get to the Islamic heaven, the only message is, I want you to prostrate yourself and bow down to me 50 times a day. What a lovely God that would create an inferior species to worship him. That is a God I never want to know. Now, this transformation from a three-dimensional physical being in the land of Israel to a seventh-dimensional spiritual being, the subsequent enrichment, the empowerment, the liberty necessary to make all that happen is genuinely beyond our comprehension.
Yes, indeed.
And what had been deprived of Israelites will now be restored. There will be a new day, a different and better outcome, even in Israel. With so much having occurred in and around the Jezreel Valley, God is returning our attention to Israel's thoroughfare, her breadbasket, and also her battlefield. Something exceedingly good and very important will transpire to counteract the often hellish history of this place. Beyond the stories that we addressed in previous chapter that we covered over the previous month or so, there is another worthy, I think, of our consideration, and it is Gideon. He was triumphant in Jezreel.
Yes.
Now, Shaul was defeated and committed suicide, and Dode was victorious here. But that's not the specific story that Yahweh is addressing. The day of Jezreel, the day that God will reap what he has sown in Jezreel, is directing our attention to God, along with the millions who will invade Israel in the last days. He will die and be buried in Jezreel. It will be the mother of all battles. As is so often the case with the Almighty and fitting, Yahweh will prevail over religious, political, militant, and conspiratorial Goyim in the place that Yisrael acted the most like them. It's interesting. In Ezekiel 5, when Yahweh is condemning Israel, there are two things that he says that are really get your attention. He says, when it comes to being repulsive and religious, you're now worse than the Goyim. Jews had become worse than the Goyim, he says, when it comes to repulsiveness and religion. And then he said, you're even worse as it relates to Harmon. And Harmon is a really interesting term. You see, Abraham, the father of the grandfather, really, of the 12 tribes, a great grandfather, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob. His name, when it was changed to Abraham, has two roots. Ab is, of course, the father, and means father in both. But he can either be Ab Ruchamah, which is merciful father, or Ab Harmon, which is father of the belligerent and boisterous, the father of the argumentative and warlike, the father of the loudmouthed and confused. And that's what we're seeing
looking
here, is that that there are going to be lots of Harmon, army troops that are exceedingly noisy as they march in. So the very place that Israel was like the Muslims and the Christians and being militant and loudmouthed and confused, Harmon is the very place that Yahweh will rescue them in the last days. Yom Yisrael. It's very close to the pronunciation of Israel, but it's with a YZ. Ra'el is the day the seeds sown by God come to fruition in Jezreel. It is illustrative of one of the last battles Yahweh and Yehudim will fight for the survival of the people. It draws upon an interesting history. And God's not going to win this battle by bringing in the big guns. No, he's just going to annihilate everyone who came to fight against Israel. It draws an intriguing history. Shaul would commit suicide in the valley after his army was annihilated by the Philistines. He chose his fate as surely as he chose to consult with the witch of Endor. By contrast, Dowd would fight 66 battles. You know what number of those 66 battles he won?
Batting 1,000, isn't he?
Yeah, he was batting 1,000, all of them, ridding the land of the Philistine problem. And in this place, of all places, because he relied on Yahowah, which was the secret of his success. Fast forward 3,000 years, and we will find Yahowah engaged again to protect the remnant of his people. And as is foretold in Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, Daniel, Yoel, and especially Yaketzel, countless millions of Muslims under the Magog Federation and Gog's leadership will flood into Israel with the intent of annihilating Jews while claiming the land for Allah. Yahowah does not quantify the number of enraged Muslims who will flood into Israel, but the metaphors he deploys throughout the prophets suggest that we should expect in the range of 100 million. As for Jezreel accommodating that many, the math is rather interesting. The valley is approximately 100 square miles. Whether marching or in an encampment, each armed and provisioned combatant requires about 3 square yards of space. With 3 million square yards per square mile, up to 100 million Muslims will receive what they intended to inflict in the shadow of Megiddo.
Isn't that interesting? Wow.
Yeah. Well, we have
done.
broached this. Yeah, I would like to do the math because Yahowah is precise. He tells a story, and the story that he tells is always credible. Now, while we have broached this battle periodically throughout the prophets, the final determination of its timing, the identity and the quantity of its combatants, and whether this is one war or two, spreading from Jezreel to Jerusalem, is something that we have of table because it's really something where we should put all the pieces together. You know, I think I'll survive my last stay in Babylon and get to Ezekiel 32 through 36 and cover this battle. This would be the battle fought in the Jezreel Valley, Gog and Magog. And then we will return to what Yeshaya and Yirmiyah have to say about a battle outside of Jerusalem, and come to understand if they are one battle or two battles. Certainly, they're all fought in the last 3.5 years of the time of trouble, which means that I wouldn't expect either to occur prior to 2029, perhaps even 2030 being the earliest this will happen. We have every indication from what Dowd told Daniel and Danielle that the UN 242, the treaty restricting Israel's right to live in their own land, will be imposed upon them, and it will likely be imposed 7 years prior to Yahowah's return, and then things will get really nasty 3.5 years prior to his return, when I think it's going to be May Day in 2030, when the Torahless one will proclaim that he is God and will outlaw the participation in any one of Yahowah's Moed Mikre or his Shabbat. So that is where we are headed, and it'll be interesting to see if it is one ongoing battle or two specific battles that are fought during the last days. We will continue to translate and then comment based upon what the words say.
Okay.
we still have, as I say, a lot of time and a lot on our plate to survey and digest. In the order of things, this was the 8th volume that we're sharing of Yada Yahowah. The 9th volume was just recently published and is available on the Yada Yahowah website. It's one of only 3 remaining to be translated and rewritten to complete our final edit of the series. And actually, what I did is I made it one more. So we're now. I am happy to say that sometime last week, with the final edit of Volume 9 of Yada Yahowah, after the 4 volumes of Questioning Paul, the 3 of Introduction to God, the 2 of Coming Home, the 5 of Observations, and now the 9 of Yada Yahowah, the rewrite is complete. As I'm writing now Volume 10 of Yada Yahowah, this is material that I've never translated. It's the first new book, if you will, although all of these books were completely rewritten from scratch, so it was just rewritten 25 books. But this is the first new book in some time. And lo and behold, I had to pick Ezekiel to stay in Babylon. It's obvious that Yahweh did not pick me for my intelligence, or just because maybe the smart thing is finish in Babylon and then move on. The reason I picked Ezekiel and Yakitzia is his Hebrew name is that with Daniel speaking of how we get from here to there and the last days, and I think we did a pretty good job of making sense of everything that was predicted in Daniel and exactly how things are going to transpire as we reach the end and the exact timing of things. Ezekiel does pick up from there and does take us right to the end with these battles, and then even talks about the new temple and New Jerusalem and that sort of thing. So it is a natural follow-on. So we'll stay in Babylon long enough to get that out, because I think we have provided a sufficient base. And by the way, we'll stop broadcasting here in a moment. We'll be able to still record here for a while, and 95% of the listens are to archive, so we'll still talk here a while for the recording. And all those listening by phone will be able to continue to hear us. That the idea is that we're going to stay on future prophecy for a while, because of the fact that we've done a pretty comprehensive job of presenting how you prepare for Yahweh's return. An Introduction to God goes all the way through all of the source material, explains why we're here, who you are, who we are, how we have access to the oldest manuscripts, how the language itself works, some of its unique qualities of Hebrew and its stems and its moods and its conjugations and the like. And then it goes through the fundamentals in a Introduction to God. It's a 3-volume set, and from there are 9, and sometime soon there'll be 10 volumes of Yada Yahowah that begin with creation. The 2nd volume is in the garden, and takes you through the flood. The 3rd volume speaks of the covenant family and how to become part of the covenant. And then from there are 3 volumes on the Moed Mikre. The first one focusing on Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. The second one focusing on Shabua and Teruah. The third and final one focusing on Kippurim and Sukkah. A lot to understand between the covenant and those invitations to meet with God. And then from there, we take readers through this volume on Hosea. Then there's a volume on separation through Daniel, and now this one, the 10th one, being devoted to what Ezekiel was shown. This then takes us through the observation series, and the observation series of 5 books begins in the Mashal Proverbs, which are Dod speaking as the son on behalf of his father and mother, Yahweh and the Ruach Kodesh, and then walks us through this call that these prophecies that where God speaks of our time and how we got here. Then that leads to Coming Home, 2 volumes where we go through the Mizmor, where Dod is allowed to speak to us, and he calls his people home prior to his return. And then for both Jews wanting to know what it is about Christianity that was so hostile to them for so long, and how Christianity came to be born out of what a twisting, perverted version of what God revealed to his people. Questioning Paul is a really good read. It's 4 volumes. It explains just how disgusted Paul, or Yahweh, is against Paul. He calls him the plague of death. But it's a really good read for Jews to understand how this religion grew in their midst and how to effectively disprove it. And there are 3 other books. I did build a company from nothing to take it public, and it's just a way of getting to know one another and really understand economics and corporate dynamics. It's called In the Company. It's also available, as is my meeting with the Islamic terrorists right after 9/11, called Tea with Terrorists. And lastly, so that you know that when I'm criticizing Judaism, consistent with what Yahweh has to say throughout his Torah and prophets, that I'm not just picking on Jews. In addition to destroying the credibility of Christianity and questioning Paul, I wrote Prophet of Doom, which is the most comprehensive and chronological presentation of the Quran and Hadith, so that it is Muhammad's terrorist manifesto in his own words. So all of that is available, and because of that wealth of material, I think we can spend a goodly amount of time now just talking about prophecy and what's going to happen between now and the time that Yahweh returns. And he's going to return with Dod. He's returning to Israel. He's returning to reconcile his relationship with his people, which means that there can be no Christianity. There can be no New Testament. There can be no replacement theology. There can be no black Hebrews or Christians, church replacing Jews. He is returning to Israel and Yehudah, just as this had stated, and he is going to reconcile his relationship by placing his Torah literally inside of these individuals, so that it becomes part of the fabric of our lives, guiding our decisions as we go forth into eternity. So that is where we are, and that is what Yahweh is speaking specifically about at this point. So, in the order of things, as I've shared, this is now the 8th volume of Yada Yahowah that we're speaking of. This is now the second or third chapter of that volume. It is one of only 2 remaining to be part of the old series. And once finished and positioned in their places on the bookshelf of YadaYah.com, we are now to the point where we're turning our attentions to the events pertaining to Yom Yisrael, what will happen on the day of Jezreel. It's going to be a massive undertaking because we will include a comprehensive and integrated analysis of Daniel. I wrote here 9 through 12, but actually we began in Daniel 7, which is where the prophecies began, and went through 12, translating every word. And we're fairly thorough in terms of discussing what comes in chapters 1 through 6, which is prophetic of all bad things, and a pretty nasty story, really. We've translated most of Zechariah already, but we have to return to do 12 through 14. We translated most of Zechariah because prior to that point, it's all regarding Yahweh's Yom Kippurim return. And then we will turn to Joel chapter 3, and we're going to find ourselves investigating the fate of Babylon and Israel, beginning with Isaiah 17 and 18, which we've translated previously and shared on numerous occasions. And then we have to return to present all of 47 through 66, much of which we've covered in the past, but pulling it all together for strictly its prophetic proclamations about the end days. We're going to also pursue the same storyline throughout Jeremiah, beginning in the 49th and running through the 51st chapters. And I had thought that we would turn to Ezekiel 32, followed by this, what is a tumultuous journey, commencing in chapter 35, and ending until we conclude our review of Yahweh's response to mankind's mayhem in the 39th chapter. But I actually began in verse 1 of chapter 1. And I couldn't help myself because the two depictions of what, of allegedly what God is like. One was written by Daniel, and it isn't what God is like at all. It's what Satan was like when Paul encountered him on the road to Damascus. And that was quite an eye-opener to recognize that he is in Babylon, and what he is seeing is the king of Babylon, Satan. And I thought that was enough for one lifetime in terms of, you're not going to believe this, but nonetheless it's true. But Ezekiel 1 and 2 go right back to the same beast. Wow. The revelation in Ezekiel 2 is not of God. It's of Satan. And it's of Satan rising out of Babylon to be the god of religion. He is the god of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. He's the god of politics. And it shows what he will be like. It even talks about the four faces of in terms of astrological faces, and they are the four religions. The Babylonian pagan religion that manifests itself in the throughout the what's called the Abrahamic religions, becoming Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And it is a beast. It's a monstrous beast. And the same reference to the beast is it's a living corpse. And so it's of Satan. And so anyway, that's where we are. I finally finished those translations, and I'm now in chapter 5 of Zechariah. But even there, we're one surprise after another. You know that one of the surprises in Zechariah 5, or excuse me, in Yaquetzil 5, Ezekiel 5, is that God actually says something I never thought I would hear from him. He said, listen, the religious, they're going to die. And when the religious die, and I find out that you didn't bother to warn them, you made no effort to teach them. And after you making no effort to teach them, and they die, I'm going to hold you accountable.
Wow.
That's something I never thought I'd read. And the reason I never thought I'd read it is that I'm looking at it from our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
We've come to the covenant. We've come to Yahweh's Torah. We've come to Yahweh, and every moment of the way, at least when we're not in Babylon or not talking about Paul, is joyous, uplifting. It's enriching. It's empowering. It's liberating. Marvelous. And so what we want to do is to share it. We want to tell people the religions that are casting God into a very different light and leading people astray or wrong so that people break free of them, and then they come to embrace what Yahweh is offering. And it's just naturally, we can't imagine not doing it. You know, Kirk, I've never asked you to do these things. You just volunteered. Jackie, who is our lead publicist, we don't ask her to do these things. She volunteered. David, who manages the website, volunteered. We volunteer because we love Yahweh. We're excited to be part of His family,
participate, however,
and we recognize that this is not a net zero game. The fact that He's going to give His covenant members the entire universe, our share is not diminished by having a larger family. It's actually enriched by having a larger family. So we're naturally predisposed to share this. And I don't think there's been a single day where I've said, boy, I better do this or God's going to be mad at me.
I hadn't considered it.
Not once. Yeah, and haven't even considered it. Okay, but that's our perspective. Where was Ezekiel? In Babylon. Yep. And so from his perspective, Yahweh had to say, listen, I'm going to show you all this stuff. But if you don't convey it, if you don't have the courage and the fortitude and the character to convey it, then I'm going to hold you responsible. So it's a very different place than where we are. And I can see why he said it, but it was certainly not what I expected. You read that and say, whoa.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's a lot. It's a perspective I never considered before. So anyway, that's where we are in this in the progression of events. We continue to grow, we continue to learn, we continue to celebrate our relationship, and we continue to share. And those of you who have listened, and if you are a marginal Christian, then we would encourage you to read Questioning Paul, walk away from your religion, and then begin this journey to Yahweh with us. If you're a Jew and you are, well, if you're a Jew and you're a Haredim, you're not listening to this program because you're prohibited from having access to the Internet. They preclude you learning English, the language spoken by most Jews, than any other in the world, because they don't want you to learn the truth. And so you weren't listening to us anyway. But if you are a marginal Jew in the sense of questioning your religion, and you're not dominated by your love for one of the 4,000 political parties in Israel, then we welcome you to join us on this search. Leave your religion and your politics at the door. Come and listen. We do this for you. And if you think we're being unkind by criticizing Judaism and criticizing Israeli politics, then I want you to understand.
Just quoting Yahweh.
We say what Yahweh says. And Yahweh wants this known. He was exceedingly verbose about it. I guess you could even call God verbose. It is the same message in the Torah as it is with every prophet. It is the dominant theme of what he conveys is he is disgusted by the religiosity of Jews. So if you don't want to hear it, then you're not interested in listening to God. It is the prerequisite of becoming part of the covenant. You cannot become part of the covenant family unless you are first willing to walk away from your religion and politics, from your country, from Babylon. So that's why we say these things. We are not trying to be unkind to Jews. We are devoted to calling Yahweh's people home. The first step in that is for them to recognize that their religion has led them astray, to disavow it, to disavow Israeli politics, and to trust Yahweh, observe his testimony, listen to him, embrace his name, accept the terms and conditions of the covenant, and attend his Moed Mikre. He will then take care of the rest. Well, boys and girls, is there anything we missed as we conclude this program for this evening? And we'll pick it up this time next week.
Yeah, that's a pretty good slice right there.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your contribution. We appreciate all of you who are listening and everyone who is working together to share Yahweh's message with his people, to call his people home at this time. May Yahweh bless.
Yeah, Shabbat Shalom, y'all.
Good night.
Shabbat Shalom, Kirk.
Good night.
Night.